Okay.
Hi, Thomas. I'm glad you agreed to come meet me today. I'm hoping we can have a good discussion between the two of us and talk about, how we move forward. I know our recent past hasn't been, certainly as smooth as I hoped it would have been. And I'm hoping today can mark the start of a new chapter in our relationship, both professionally and personally as well.
Yeah, it's a really hard decision for me to accept this meeting with you. But overall, I still think we need to talk. Given what happened in the past, I'm sorry for how we came up with this situation.
And I certainly appreciate that this is not an easy conversation, and I'm, very, very thankful that you're here and that you're taking the time to meet with me. And I think my hope for today is we can spend some time talking about, how we move forward with PrimeGeo, and how we can work out an agreement that really allows both of us to feel really positively about where things are headed.
Yes. So, well, how's things going with the PrimeGeo right now?
It's been a challenging few years. I mean, since the recession hit, we've seen a pretty steep drop off in a lot of our work in the local economy in local countries, and we've actually had to make a lot of investments overseas, which are starting to pay a little bit of dividends, but the profitability is a lot lower.
Yeah. I saw that, so I got this revenue profit chart. I see the recent 3 years you were not. We are actually. I'm still part of the shareholders.
You are still very much one of our shareholders. We're all in it together.
I'm sorry to see that. Yeah, I was wondering why our profits has been stable for the past 3 years and significantly down from the 3 years ago.
Yeah, I mean the biggest challenge we face is that when the crisis hit the economy 5 years ago. We still had a few projects, but what we've seen since then is there's not really any construction projects that want to pay for our specialized expertise, that want to invest the time to get the knowledge that you built up for us and that you really positioned us in the market as the technical experts. And so what we've had to do is we've had to open subsidiaries in other countries where there still are those mega projects and where our technical know-how is still valued, but the profit margins there are much lower, and we've taken steps even internally to control our costs as well to try and make our profit where it can be.
Yeah. Sorry. Can you give me 1 minute?
Of course.
Yeah, I had the technical issue here. I got the wrong sheet. Maybe I just ask you when I'm looking for my document. Why do you want to meet with me today?
Well, I'm hoping, number one is we can turn the page. And number two, I think for us, and I would imagine for you, I would much rather we find an agreement between the two of us than have a judge decide our 2 lawsuits for us.
So basically you want to avoid the lawsuits?
I think we can get a better outcome if we work together to find an agreement than if we leave it in the hands of a judge. That is the biggest intention for meeting is I think you and I can come up with something that will meet what we're both looking for together.
Yeah, I think that's why I'm also here, and so we want to solve the issue, ideally just to avoid additional loss to both of us.
Right. I mean, I know you went and started working for Geoloy recently. How has that been going? Are you enjoying it? Is it something that's kind of exciting for you?
Well, you know what happened after what happened between us, and I had to find this new position in the company. It pays me well. So far, like in terms of the compensation and lifestyle, I
Right.
like it. I think it's good. There are still like downsides of it because I created our company
Yes.
from my expertise, R&D specialist.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I definitely get more sense of treatment from the company I created with you together. Than this company where I'm currently in, I feel less impact I created in that company.
Right. And are you traveling overseas a lot? I know a few people have said that, your company's doing a lot of work overseas. But I don't know if that has meant you have spent a lot of time overseas.
Yes, that's a good point. It still requires a lot of traveling, and my wife has complained a little bit about this lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
That's the downside of it, my current job as well.
Right, is that you're never home, and obviously your wife would like you to be home a little bit more.
Yes.
I can imagine.
Yes, you're right. Yeah. Um, so so how? I'm just thinking. I'm still kind of stuck in like what we had before in the history. So how do you think at this point, about 4 or 5 years ago, you guys played on this legal trick on me to keep me out?
I certainly, with the benefit of hindsight, have remorse that that's what it came to. I think, we all played a role in what happened. I lost my cool. Our other partner lost their cool as well. I
Lost the what? Sorry.
lost their cool, lost their temper.
Okay.
And I think we, at the time, felt frustration that, and effectively felt cornered, and that we had no other option. I think it would have been far better for us to sit down, have a conversation like this, face to face, and part of what I'm hoping we can do today is close a very unfortunate chapter of our history, and come to a start for the next phase, so that you are still one of the 3 founders, shareholders, owners of PrimeGeo, and we want to use today not only to start repairing the personal relationship, but also help PrimeGeo move to whatever the next stage is for PrimeGeo.
Okay, I'm glad to hear you had an open mindset on that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I do agree. There are both sides mistake on that history.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I maybe stuck with my own thoughts about the wrong strategic route our company was taking. Because I believed in my thoughts of long-term benefit to the client and wasn't taking enough factor of the economic crisis.
Right.
And that kind of damaged our revenue by that time. So I think it's a both sides problem to cause the unfortunate situation.
Absolutely, yeah.
So at this point, I think as I heard, our company wasn't doing well.
No, it's been a struggle, and we've had to invest a lot to enter new markets because there isn't a lot of work in the current market that requires our specialist R&D. There's more work for companies that offer a lower price point, maybe a more basic service. But for our part of the market, it's been very tough.
Okay. So I have a couple proposals. If you're also open to, I'm also open to your opinion.
I would love to hear what you have in mind.
Well, I think if we can try to avoid the coming lawsuit by agreeing a price under the table to get me out of the situation. But I think that's open to our discussion.
So you're looking to sell your stake in PrimeGeo? Did I understand that correctly?
That's one proposal
Okay.
I want to make because it's the point where we have been struggling on like how we can solve this issue.
Right.
So it's from our personal communication. my impression is you want the control back and to the company and to involve new blood into this the company.
I certainly think that is one option on the table. You are very much one of the founders, and I think where we have struggled is that because we need 75% to make any major decision, that has meant that if you have chosen not to vote with the two of us, we effectively can do nothing. And so I think from our perspective, it's less about we want you completely gone.
Out of the picture, yeah.
It's more about, how can we make sure that we're able to move forward. And so a couple of ideas I've had on that front would be, one, if we change the voting threshold from, say, 75% to 2/3, that would be another way around the current challenge. Another option is you sell a portion of your stake, so you own 33.333%, much like myself and our other partner.
Okay.
If you wanted to go down to 20, 15, 5, 10, whatever number, kind of works.
Yes.
That's another option. At the same time, I understand if, given our past history, you say, I want to sell.
Okay. Yeah, I'm thinking there are a couple options. First is I sell the shares, I get out of the picture, so we're done with I'm down my shareholder rights on this.
Right.
But there are other clauses we can think of how we can cooperate on a future basis, just without me on the board. Right. I got my financial compensation, and I can also involve in the R&D side on the side. And also, secondly, I agree with your option, which I sell partial, and then you get your involvement, you get your voting rights, and so I don't need to involve on the key decision making.
Yeah.
And so that's the part we can also discuss.
Absolutely.
And also another option I propose will be I still sell all my shares, but we start because you valued my expertise in R&D, and I do have a lot of good ideas recently, which I think will be potential good revenue source. And as we can start looking for another venture together, just for the ideas I had, and to launch it and raise funds on it and get a certain split on the revenue and profit on it.
I think that's a very interesting idea, some sort of joint venture agreement.
Yeah, I get out from our existing company, and then we start another new VC on the new opportunities.
Yeah, I think that's all, those are all interesting ideas, and I think we would love to have access to your technical expertise, your background, your R&D.
Yeah.
And so, one of the options I've thought about is, that we bring you on as either a consultant or director of R&D, because as we do more work in emerging markets, we're now working overseas. You have spent the last few years doing that at Geoloy.
Yeah.
And so you now have experience in an area where we have had struggles. And I think we could benefit a lot from not only having your R&D expertise, but also your experience in other countries back in the company. I think would be something that would be very interesting.
Yeah, so it's up to, I'm open to all the options, and then we can decide how much we want to pay for each options. Which one you would prefer?
I think from my perspective, having you come back in-house as an R&D consultant would be great. And then I think, however we solve the voting issue, I think to me there's kind of two ways of doing it. One is we agree to change, effectively the corporate charter so that we only need 2/3 of shareholders to approve major changes instead of 75% today. Or the other one is you choose to sell, enough to get us to 75%, and then you can choose to sell however much you would like, or keep anything you want beyond that.
Well,
I don't know how those resonate with you, if that's of interest to you.
I like the second proposal you mentioned, actually kind of aligned with my second proposal as well, is I can sell partially,
Okay.
and then I sit on the board as advisor to the R&D.
Yeah, I think that would be a very, very interesting
Yeah,
option.
and I can get an annual compensation for my advisory service.
Yeah.
So then in that case, because also I still want involvement in the business.
Yes.
Yeah, because
I mean, you helped found it.
I see the potential we have,
Mhm.
even though it's downside at this point. But I can help to turn it around.
Yeah.
So then about a few years ago we decided on the price, and I wasn't came out successfully for the whole 33%.
Right.
So I remember that was about 7 million.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that was, if I remember correctly, that was
It's based on
4 years ago, right?
Yeah, 4 years ago, 33%.
Right, and so, at that time, that was kind of at our peak when we were absolutely at our best.
Yes, that was based on the revenue.
Yeah.
And 4 to 6, right? Years ago, yeah.
Yeah, and as I'm sure you can appreciate now that the company's profitability and sales have gone down,
Yeah.
the valuation of our company has unfortunately come down as well.
So I totally understand at this point we're at the low, and so you mentioned, so how much percentage I think maybe giving up 10% will be enough to give you back the decision rights.
Yeah, so if you were to sell
So you have
10%,
80%,
if you were to sell 80%, we would now have 76.3% or 76.6%.
So if I sell 10%, then you have 76. Yes.
Yeah, then we have.
So that will be a voting right, right?
Yeah, then we would have the majority required for our 75% that to have formal control.
Okay.
And so I think 10% would be something very workable.
Okay.
If you're comfortable with that.
Yes, I agree on 10%.
Okay, so 10% seems good. I think, in addition to that, as we think about, what that 10% is worth, I very much like your idea of you becoming an advisor to the board with some form of annual compensation attached to that.
Yeah. So I'm just thinking how we decide the price for the 10% first, and then we can discuss how we get me to involve in R&D.
Okay, yeah, we can tackle it in that order.
So maybe we can start with the valuation of the PrimeGeo.
Yeah.
And then
of the
use
whole
that
company.
as 10%.
Yeah, we value the whole company and
Yeah.
then say, okay, we take 10%.
Yeah,
of it.
that sounds a reasonable approach to me.
Yeah.
In terms of the valuation, I think it should be a combination of current time and the future forecast of your EBITDA, right? Of our profit.
Right, yeah, and so, not only
so
today.
Look at the historical and the future forecast of the trend. Yeah.
Right, I think that's certainly part of it. I think the challenge with history is everything we're seeing right now is that the low levels of profitability we have today, we don't see that changing radically. Like, we don't see it coming back up to 3.7 million anytime soon.
So would you agree at least? So we will come to the half point at least, because we had this issue since 4 years ago.
Right.
And if we discuss now, it's not fair to say we just based on the current point, for the valuation next year. So we already had this lawsuit going on for years, and
Yes.
if you don't want to continue with this lawsuit about potential risk from future, right? Additional costs from lawyers and reputation risk from both sides. So those are all non-financial measurements you can think of to get this deal under the table instead of at the court.
Right, and I completely understand your point. At the same time, we have to be mindful that the profitability of the business today is quite low, and so we have to make sure that whatever agreement we come to today doesn't hurt our profitability going forward.
Yeah. So still, I'm going to come aboard to help you to turn around. And
right.
So it's a significant decision for me to give up the voting rights for the company.
Absolutely.
I created with you, and also given the history, we already had such a bad quarrel and also dispute on our history. If you really don't want to go to, I actually have full confidence if we go to the board, we might get a fair evaluation based on lawyers' evaluation. But I'm happy to discuss with you under the table just about our thoughts, how we can make this better.
Right, and so we had some advisors prepare a valuation based on where the company is today, which I think could be an interesting starting point for the discussion. And they looked at it different ways. On one side, they said, if you look only at revenue, what is it worth? Then they did a couple of different approaches that looked at, based on current profitability, what is the company worth? And then they did some voodoo financial magic that only they understand.
Okay, well, what's the number then?
So it creates a range.
Yeah.
And if I go back, so 4 years ago, we were talking about $7 million, right?
Yes.
Which meant that we at the time felt the business was worth $21 million. That would be the valuation.
$21 million.
Because we were going to pay you $7 million for 1/3 of the business.
Yeah.
So you do 7 divided by 1/3. The business was worth $21 million.
Okay.
That's what we are.
21 million or 21 billion?
21 million. Yes.
Million. Okay.
Sorry, I misspoke.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's what we had potentially agreed to 4 years ago before other things happened. Today that valuation has come down pretty significantly. At the low end, the business is only worth $3 million today. And I think that, so obviously that's the low end. Obviously, depending on your assumptions, it might be worth more. But it's hard for us.
So I think so. First of all, maybe there's some mechanism behind the valuation. We need to investigate later. Just overall thinking, to determine the price for my compensation for this loss, you have to take a look at our history, also in our other opportunity costs.
Yeah.
So it's not purely based on the valuation you came up with.
No,
I agree on that.
But I can agree to that. At the same time, we as a company have had opportunity costs because we haven't been able to sell the company. We haven't been able to make acquisitions. We haven't been able to do a lot of stuff. So I think there's been opportunity cost for both of us that we need to take into account. I guess you have done a lot of research and you've seen all our numbers. Where would you feel a fair value is today?
I would at least use the same multiple to agree a number on this. Right?
The same multiple on profits?
On the profit. Yeah.
Right.
So
okay.
Since you used the 10 multiple for 3 years ago, about 9 multiple.
It would be somewhere around 7, I think. No.
So it was 3 years ago. Right?
4 years.
4 years ago.
Yeah, so 3.7.
And you're saying 21.
Right, because we were going to, because we offered you 7 million, right?
Yeah.
And that was for 1/3, which means it would be 21 million for 100%.
Yeah, so 21 million divided by 4 is about, so about 6 or 5 to 6.
Right, so we would have valued it, roughly let's call it 6 to make the math easy.
6, yeah.
So 6 times profit.
Yeah.
Or 1 times sales. Do we agree on that? Because sales were 22 million, roughly.
Yep.
And so today...
let's put aside other costs we need to take into account and just purely look at the valuation part piece.
So it would be roughly 4.2 million based on profits.
6 million multiply.
Si-
Well, yeah.
6 times 7 would
based
be.
on revenue, it's a 13 million.
Right. I mean, I think.
So it's a range.
It's a range, and I certainly think that for us, the 13 million isn't necessarily representative anymore because margins have come down a lot because there's not much work here in North America anymore. We're in developing countries where margins are a lot smaller. And so, I think a number around 4.2 million I could get comfortable with. Now, I like your idea that you can help us turn around the business. What one idea I have is we also say, in 2 years, we revalue the company, and if the company value is much higher, you get a percentage of that as a bonus. We effectively say, let's take an example. Let's say that in 2 years from now, because you've helped us, the company is now worth $10 million instead of 4.2.
Okay.
A lot of that would be your hard work. We could come to an agreement where you get a percentage of the 6 million as an additional kind of one-time bonus that says, hey, you have helped us really grow the value of the company. We recognize that you had to take less money and that the valuation came down from our first offer.
Yeah. So I like that idea a lot. I definitely give one more incentive to be involved in this R&D project.
Effectively, it's like an earn-out type agreement that I have in mind.
Yeah. Back to the base part we're discussing. So I think it's not the lower end which we should look for at this point because we also need to factor in the growth rate into the valuation, right?
Right, and so the valuations that we had our financial team prepare with growth.
So I just simply say some assumption is like you have to factor in the professional costs involved in the lawsuit. If we can avoid that, it's a saving for your side as well. And also some additional risk, for going to the court. Let's say those are about like 500K, and then.
Sorry, how'd you come up with $500,000?
Well, so those are just the additional costs, like assumptions I make.
Right.
But I think the lower end I'm looking for is about 1 million I should get from this, and it's already less than 1/3 of the 7 million we agreed on.
So what you're saying, I just want to make sure I understood you, is that
based on 10 million, yeah.
It is a $10 million valuation.
Yeah, and that's within this range.
I mean, it is within this range. I think the reason I have a hard time getting to $10 million is these multiples reflect our business 4 years ago. The business 4 years ago and the business today aren't the same. And so I understand that we've both incurred a lot of legal costs and all that, and that those would go away. Would us agreeing to reimburse you for all your historical legal costs, would that be something of interest to you?
I'm more looking for the actual numbers I can get, because I care a lot about my loss from this situation 4 years ago. So I do appreciate about any reimbursement and future involvement incentive, but I still feel like we should have settlement on just for the compensation part piece we already discussed a few years ago. And I already agreed to decrease to selling 10% instead of 33%. So
right.
if we potentially going to the court for 33, I will pursue after 33%, and that will be way more than the dollars we proposed here, and then I'll have zero involvement in the R&D side.
Right, and I agree with you. I think we just have to balance that if we pay you a higher valuation today, it makes it much harder to do any sort of earn-out bonus, and it will also limit our ability to pay you a lot for any consulting work.
Yeah. How about for 1 million? And I don't ask for the percentage, but let's say I gotta fix the bonus, fix the compensation for the R&D project I propose.
So
For my advisory on the R&D.
And that compensation for the R&D work, for your advisory work.
Yes.
How would you see that? Would you see it as a percentage of increased profits? Would you see that as, so many thousand or hundreds or whatever dollars per month? Would you see it as, per hour? How would you think about it?
I'm thinking maybe as a per hour, since I'm just involved as a professional service.
Okay.
So I would more intend to be limited my involvement as per hour rate.
Okay, so it would very much be on a per hour.
Yeah.
Do you have any sense of how much your ideas could be worth?
Not at this point, to be honest. Yeah.
Right.
But we can discuss the involvement part later.
Right. I'm just trying to get a sense, because if you say, hey, my ideas are worth $5 million, all of a sudden it makes it easier for me to get to a valuation that's in the range you're looking for. But without that, frankly, my advisors don't think the business is worth $10 million.
So to be honest, I don't have a clear numbers for you in terms of realizing the financial benefit of my R&D project.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just purely like a potential revenue opportunity for you that you can think of. I have to frankly say we still need to research and implement that idea. And you have seen my proven track of good successful R&D. So it's up to you to think about that. So for me, it's just I want the compensation and involvement in the R&D on a fixed compensation on per hour basis.
Right. I guess I'm just trying to wrap my head around how you get to the business being worth $10 million right now. That I understand you want $1 million. What's most important to you? Is it selling 10%? Is it getting $1 million?
So from my point of view, I know our company, I know it will be turning around in future, just given the trend, and also I have full confidence like our potential capability. So I absolutely disagree at the lower point to value our company in order, and also so that's why I tend to use the middle range of the 6 years development instead of 3 years development in terms of valuation.
So, sorry, which middle range do you use?
So 10 million is between the 21 million and the 4 million, right?
Right.
So I just use the middle range.
Right. I agree with you that we need to look at history as well. From our perspective, it's just hard when we look at, okay, we have a business today, and that's what we're talking about, is that business today. It's hard for us to justify paying, paying twice as much as the business is worth. The business, from the experts we've hired, they can't really get to a $10 million valuation. And so that's why I'm trying to understand, is there something that you would like the $1 million for? Is it something where this would allow you to leave your current role? I know you said you have personal challenges with your wife because of the travel in your current role. Is this a way for you to leave that and get financial security? Or I'm just trying to understand kind of what's going on right now.
I think it's a decision it's one of the options which we both preferred. So I'm definitely okay with if you chose another option, but for this part of the option which I give up partially and 10%, this is the compensation I'm looking for in order to help you get your control back and help myself to just step out from the situation with a reasonable compensation.
Right.
Without going to the court. Yeah.
I understand that. Would there be any interest in paying part of that amount today? So saying, we'll pay you $500,000 today, for example, and then we will pay you $500,000 in 2 years, no matter what happens. So you get your $1 million.
Like by installments?
Yeah. Deferring it over time because of the situation the business is in today, where, if we pay you $1 million, that's more than all our profits for the year.
Without any additional clause, or is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm saying, if we did something like we pay you half of the amount today, we pay you 25% next year, we pay you the last 25% in 2 years, and if in the meantime the value of the business goes up, you get the benefit of the business going up. We made sure that, effectively we set a floor, and then we give you like unlimited upside.
That sounds reasonable to me. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I can accept that payment method.
Okay, so we would go 50% today.
Yeah. And let's do 25%, and get the upside for the next 2 years.
Right. Now, I think that helps our business from a cash flow perspective.
Yeah.
So I think if we look at that, what's I guess more interesting to you? Is it to get a higher valuation guaranteed, like a higher floor and then a lower percentage of the upside, or is it to get a lower floor with more upside? So as I mentioned, I think for me, I want the cash, and as soon as possible. I just so I agreed to this game, and I would have just 50% cash and 25, and then get the upside of any evaluation above based on the 10 million. Okay, so if we were to work out an agreement that says, I'll use the 10 million valuation as an example for right now. So we say the valuation is 10 million, which means your stake is worth 1 million, the 10% you're selling. So we would pay you $500,000 this year, $250,000 each of the next 2 years.
Okay. And then if the business grow to 15 million at this point, 15 million here.
Hey, I have a reservation to do.
Yeah, we're finished in 5 minutes.
All right, next time could you just drop by the front desk or drop us an email?
Sure. Yeah,
right,
thank you so much. Sorry.
Yeah,
so 15 here and 15 here, and the upside 5 million.
Yeah.
So are we looking for a percentage now?
Yeah. You'll own 23%.
Yeah. So I still own 23% of the business.
Yeah, right. Because we're giving you a higher guaranteed valuation, would you accept, say, 15%?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Fine, yeah. 15%.
So 15% of upside. After 2 years. So in 2 years, and let's agree that we'll have an independent financial advisor determine the value. So you get 15% as determined by someone independent. So it's not yours or my valuation, it's someone independent.
Yeah.
And then 10. So you'll sell us 10%.
Yeah.
We both agreed to drop our lawsuits.
Yes, we agreed.
And forever. Like, there's no more lawsuits over this issue forever.
Yeah, I agreed to drop the lawsuits. Yeah.
Okay. And not sue us again in the future over this.
Yeah, and also get a fixed compensation for...
And what would you have in mind for that fixed compensation?
I'm thinking about like a salary an annual salary, which depends on the percentage of the time I'm going to devote it.
But at 100%, for example.
100%? No, then that means I have to quit my job.
Right, I'm just saying, like,
Advisory board.
what,
Yeah.
what would you have in mind salary-wise?
So, I'm thinking. So currently, I have 10,000 euro per month.
Right.
And assume I only have 10% involvement on the share, so I will devote about 10% of my time at least per month. So I'm thinking about just based on my current salary. Can we do by hour instead of, because I don't have a number at this point for the fixed compensation.
What would you have in mind by hour?
So let's say if we have 10,000 euro per month for 100%, then that's 10,000. So I'm thinking maybe about 100K per year.
For 100% of your time.
For the percentage of time I involve for the cap like I devoted to this project.
So if you were to work 100% of the time, we would pay you 100,000 euros. Is that it?
No, just for the total fixed compensation I involved into this project per year.
I mean, 100,000 euros a year.
Mm-hmm.
We would need some guarantee of the amount of time you spend. Because to put it into perspective, that's as much as we now pay our partners and our directors.
Really?
120,000. I'm sorry.
Okay.
But that's why like $100,000 a year would be very expensive.
Let's revisit this. Let's revisit this part later.
Let's move to another room and then we can continue our discussion.
Okay. Let's continue.